numbers. You've heard about the drop in U.S. breast cancer rate. Now, some news about our stats. Countdown to Christmas. The final rush is on. How much money are Canadians spending today? Comedy Central, the joy and the challenges of bringing laughs to soldiers in Kandahar. And back to the Lotus.
Everywhere you go in Canada, every small town has a Chinese restaurant.
Food, family, and making a life on the prairie. A feature report.
The National. Here is Wendy Mesley.
Good evening. Peter is away. It is a notion that raised hope, but also skepticism. Last week, researchers in the U.S. released numbers that show breast cancer rates in that country had plunged in 2003. What caught their attention? The number of women on hormone replacement therapy in 2003 was also way down. Tonight, CBC News has learned that Canadian researchers are also starting to look at that possible link because the numbers in this country are just as intriguing. The CBC's health reporter Maureen Taylor has the story.
So then I started to think, well, maybe there's more to this than I first gave it credit.
When Dr. Stephen Narod first heard that American researchers were linking a drop in breast cancer rates to a decline in the use of hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, he was skeptical. The U.S. researchers found a 7% decline in breast cancer between 2002 and 2003, the very year millions of women abandoned their hormones because of their link to heart attacks and breast cancer. CBC News obtained the as yet unreleased Canadian data for the same years. They show a similar pattern. So when we presented them to Dr. Narod, he started to consider the possibility.
And the fact we saw it in Canada and the fact we saw it in the United States makes it a very intriguing question. But that's not yet conclusive.
In 2002, when doctors wrote more than 11 million HRT prescriptions for Canadian women, there were 102 cases of breast cancer per 100,000 women. The following year, when women learned the pills were linked to health risks, hormone prescriptions plummeted to 8.5 million, and the breast cancer rate fell to 96 cases, a drop of almost 6%. Cancers take years to develop, so it's unlikely HRT was causing breast cancer. The theory is that hormones fuel tumors. Without the fuel, the tumors remain smaller, slower growing, undetectable.
At the moment, it's the only logical explanation that we have.
Maureen Garrity isn't sure whether she should link her HRT use 7 years ago to her breast cancer.
Maybe it is because of that. If it's estrogen receptive and I'm taking a hormone replacement, was it feeding on this? I'll never really know that.
But many doctors, especially gynecologists, are still not convinced that HRT use could have such a rapid impact on breast cancer rates.
But we have to look at the fact that there can be other causations. For example, were the number of mammograms stable? Did they decrease?
Breast cancer rates after 2003 are not yet available in Canada.
But in 2 years, we're certainly going to know one way or the other.
Cancer experts point out that breast cancer rates were declining gradually before women stopped taking HRT. They admit, however, that a 6% decline over 1 year is something they haven't seen before. Maureen Taylor, CBC News, Toronto.
A landmark case in Alberta was settled today. The first time a child was able to sue her mother for injuries suffered before she was born. Canadian law prevents that, but Alberta changed its law to allow for it in one particular circumstance. Carolyn Dunn has the story.
When we first introduced you to the Rowiga family this time last year, life was difficult. Brooklyn had been born blind and severely brain damaged, the result of a car accident. Her mother, Lisa Rowiga, was at the wheel. Brooklyn was still in the womb.
I had black eyes and I was 5 months pregnant.
Now 5 years old, Brooklyn has changed Alberta law and won a groundbreaking insurance settlement.
Christmas always gives people an opportunity to do something special for someone else, and I think there's a lot of goodwill here, and the settlement comes at a very meaningful time of year.
It was a settlement which almost didn't happen. The Supreme Court had already ruled a child couldn't sue its mother for injuries before birth. The court left just one loophole for car accidents. But it would take a new Alberta law written and passed just for Brooklyn before she could sue her mother's insurance company. A year ago, that law passed, and now Brooklyn is the first person in Canada to win a settlement against her mother for injuries sustained while still in the womb.
And what this case allows them to do, this award, is allows them to get the best 24-hour care for their child, the best in the wheelchairs that are available, to meet all of the future care costs.
The undisclosed settlement will take care of Brooklyn for the rest of her life, but this little girl has set legal precedent, and other provinces are considering introducing their own versions of Brooklyn's law. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
More than 1,000 students in Montreal have lost their high school. It was destroyed last night in a spectacular fire. Père Marquette School is still standing, but just barely. Inside, the destruction is almost complete. The school board isn't sure the building will ever open again. Officials say they don't know how the fire started. About 40 night school students escaped the smoke and flames unhurt. Firefighters spent most of the night just getting the fire under control. With turkey dinner on so many minds, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency wants people to be aware of a tampering incident. An Ottawa resident found metal pins in a Granny's brand turkey cooked at home. It was picked up at Loblaws in Canada, Ontario. No one was hurt, and the CFIA says it appears to be an isolated incident, but advises consumers to be vigilant and be in touch if they have any food safety concerns. Take 7 million Canadians, add a 3-day deadline till Christmas. What do you get? A collective shopping spree worth an estimated $2 billion, all in one day. Ron Charles hit them all today on what retail experts say is the busiest shopping day of the year.
We need to buy one more gift for Jensen. Okay.
Rosie Glick is proud of her procrastination. She started shopping just yesterday for the 25 people on her Christmas list. We tagged along today for the last leg of her mall marathon.
Now I'm rushing. That's another thing about leaving things to the last minute. You're rushing.
These ones in there, $9.99.
Perfect. What size are those?
5.
In spite of the rush, Glick says there are a lot of good reasons to wait until the last minute.
I just do it all at one time. I make my list and off I go. And this way I don't really have to think about it so much. I basically know what everyone needs.
It seems a lot of people are following Rosie Glick's example, heading to the mall with just a few hours to spare. Experts say it's because of people like us that today may actually be the busiest shopping day of the year. Even so, some retail analysts say businesses may have lower seasonal sales this winter, and not just because people are spending less on Christmas.
This week, we have warm, wet weather in central Canada, and we have disturbed weather in other parts of Canada, and that's lousy for retail.
Back at Canada's malls, the procrastinators are having their day. Everyone's got an excuse.
You hope that it doesn't come around as quickly as it does. Like you think you have more time. And so, I still have 2 months to go. I still have 4 weeks to go. Oh, now it's a week to go. And now it's 3 days to go.
It doesn't matter where you are.
We tend to procrastinate, pretty much, yeah. Although we're done now, and I have 3 days left, so I'm doing pretty good.
I've worked nights, and this is the only day that I'm available.
I'm such a lazy person. I always do it for the last minute. I always do the same, always.
I enjoy the frenzy at the last minute too, though. That's a part of the excitement, I think.
What Rosie Glick considers the fun part of Christmas shopping is now over.
The only thing I have to do is I think the worst thing of it all is wrapping everything.
Ron Charles, CBC News, Toronto.
A group of Ukrainian sailors won't make it home this Christmas. Their ship has been stranded in St. John's Harbor since August, but that didn't stop Christmas from coming to them today. The CBC's Peter Gullidge explains.
The crew of this Ukrainian trawler hasn't been home since last Christmas. Stuck in St. John's Harbor 5 months now with a snapped propeller shaft waiting for a new part to come from Russia. Looks like a cold and lonely holiday in a strange city. But then, a group of St. John's elves parade up the gangway with armloads of gifts. Down in the galley, a party gets swinging, a dance, some Christmas spirits, and stuffed squid. This party was Ann Squire's idea. She owns a local real estate company.
Just watching the vessel here in a little bit of a rough condition, kind of thinking I hope they get home for Christmas.
Squires and her staff contacted local companies. Thousands of dollars in gifts rolled in to brighten this hull away from home.
Santa Claus forgot the dog.
Merry Christmas. Thank you, Canada, Ukrainian, from Ukrainian with love.
Alexander Goykov is the captain. He says after 30 years at sea, he's used to being away from home, but being trapped makes it harder. Sailors and real estate agents, nothing in common, not even a language.
Not a word, not a word. It's actually been it's been an overwhelming experience, no question.
The crew of the New Light, that's the name of this ship, they'll be here until early in the new year. That's when the ship is going to be fixed. Then they'll head back home to see their families. They may have missed Christmas, but they'll have had a celebration. Peter Gullidge, CBC News, St. John's.
Still ahead tonight.
We'll be right back with more County Canada after this missile.
Laurie Graham goes inside the newest comedy club in Afghanistan. And Nicole's dream.
I was questioning myself a lot on what had I done with my life.
That was then. Now the 60-year-old is not only changing lives.
I was so riveted by Nicole's commitment to generosity.
She's inspiring others to do the same. Hundreds of Palestinians marched on the parliament in Gaza City today, demanding that Fatah and Hamas stop fighting one another. The two factions agreed to a formal ceasefire days ago. But the street battles continue, and the people hurt are often innocent bystanders. Today, it was Fatah militants trying to stop a demonstration by Hamas in the West Bank. But the gunfire didn't stop the marchers. As the street battles go on, both sides are looking for recruits and training them. The CBC's Peter Armstrong managed to meet some young men who have signed up with Fatah and talk to them about Palestinians fighting Palestinians.
No, they're not quite ready yet. These young Fatah supporters have a long way to go before they become police officers. But 5 times a week, they get put through the ringer, training in this compound in downtown Gaza. If they work hard, they'll advance to basic training and become part of the Fatah security forces. They're a ragtag group, mostly students and unemployed young men from all over Gaza's impoverished neighborhoods. Someday, they hope to take up positions in Gaza like these elite members of the Presidential Guard. But these days, that means taking up arms against fellow Palestinians. Throughout the week, Fatah security forces have been involved in running street fights with Hamas militants. One battle broke out just outside the training compound, killing 2 policemen. So, these recruits know all too well the dangers that may await them.
Most of the young recruits come from here in Bethlehem. This community is racked with poverty. Young men say they have few options. The security forces is one of the few places that offer a steady job and regular pay.
But here, at a friend's house after training, the recent fighting looms over everything. This is not my dream, he says. I had much higher aspirations. But he asked, how else can I pay for food and help my family? Asked about the prospect of fighting fellow Palestinians, they shudder. We are all one nation, he says. Hamas and Fatah, they're all my brothers. But the fact is, once they put on the uniform, they'll become part of this conflict. So, they say they're ready to defend themselves. I know how to use the weapons, he says. I know what to do if an enemy approaches me. Increasingly, though, their enemy has become fellow Palestinians, Hamas militants. Quietly away from the camera, several confide their worries about the fighting, hoping it won't last. Still, left with few options, they come here to train. Eventually, they'll march in step, and these combat roles will be a bit more graceful. Despite this week's fighting, they're hopeful, hoping the uniform will one day be theirs, and above all else, hoping the factional clashes will end before their time as policemen begins. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Gaza.
In Afghanistan, Canadian troops are moving cautiously in their latest operation in the Panjwai district. The soldiers are just west of Kandahar city, and their commander says it's hard to tell the Taliban from the civilians.
There is a mix of non-combatants and combatants, so it's certainly one of the reasons why we are just going to go in there with guns blazing.
About 100 Canadians are taking part in the joint operation by the Afghan army and coalition troops. They say they have the area surrounded. While there's been no fighting yet, the commander says he knows the Taliban are nearby. The CBC's Laurie Graham is in Kandahar, and she went inside a very different operation, a show put on by Canadian Comics, an operation that's had its own challenges.
It may not look like much, but inside these cases, there's enough gear to make a television show. Not nearly enough time, though. A CBC crew has come to Kandahar to put on a comedy show. It may sound simple, but they have less than 8 hours to turn this military tent into a television studio. They needed a little reinforcement, so they called in the troops. They drilled, they dragged, they cut, they climbed.
Strong enough? That's going to do fine.
You're on a base, a military base in a war zone. How complicated?
It's challenging. It's raw, it's dusty, it's dirty, there's electrical issues. It's a challenge.
Finally, after a full day's work and with little time to spare, the stage is set.
Just that center area needs some iron or something.
As the last-minute touches are taken care of, there's an undercurrent of tension in the room. The producers don't know if the soldiers will come to watch. They're concerned the troops might not be in the mood to laugh.
Testing, okay, yeah.
But Sean Majumder of This Hour Has 22 Minutes is determined to get some giggles. How do you decide on what kind of humor to use in a place like Kandahar?
You know what? If people see this and they go, oh, I've seen that bit before, I don't care. I want to make these people laugh, so I'm going to be doing stuff that I've done before.
They not only brought their best jokes, they also brought a giant love letter from home, a quilt with panels from every province, each one filled with personal messages of support.
So what I'm hoping for is about 90 minutes of escape for all the people in the audience, that they don't think about their job, just for 90 minutes, that they laugh and they're reminded of home and they're reminded of good things, and, you know, they'll enjoy it.
As the doors open, soldiers on duty and off start coming in. Outside, the lineup appears endless. Inside, the seats start filling up. No more worry, no more anxiety.
I am embedded on a stage facing one of the most dedicated, well-rounded, super talented, hardcore, most awesome militaries on this planet, the Canadian Forces at Kandahar Airfield in Afghanistan. Let them know!
Soldiers in need of a good laugh filled the house.
Australians, Americans, you pretty much want to take your head down and take a nap at this point. We're a little... It's not our fault. We were all brainwashed by the CBC and that damn song. And this is the part they'll freak out. Watch this. Dun, 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 dun,
I have never felt as safe as I have in my life. I mean, even in the lineup for the Tim Hortons, I'm the only guy without a gun.
Then a reality check.
Wow, that Tim Hortons is something else, you know.
Not once, but twice during the show.
We'll be right back with more Comedy in Kandahar after this missile.
A siren warning people of a rocket attack, telling them to take cover. Not even the 2 rocket attacks could stop the show.
they are like beating us down with this no fraternization thing, and like I know they're just like this lecture, and the guy's like no fraternization, and it was weird because he was giving me a shoulder massage at the time.
And remember that giant quilt? It was a big hit.
You guys have been amazing. Thank you guys. Good night, everybody.
And so was the show. Lori Graham, CBC News, Kandahar.
We have to take a short break, but when we come back, this story. It's a question mark as big as the northern sky. What are the northern lights?
We still don't fully understand.
We'll check in with a team of Canadian scientists trying to find out.